Who is going to be the next Seahawks head coach? Things are going to move pretty quickly here. We're going to move on from the shock of a lot of people that Pete Carroll has gone, and attentions are going to turn to who comes in. We're seeing the other teams that have got vacancies requesting interviews with candidates, and it wouldn't be a huge surprise if the Seahawks are amongst those teams now that are going to start requesting interviews because they've got to get in the mix here, unless, of course, they have a candidate in mind who they are going to go after. Now, I've got a list of names here that I want to talk through, and I'll give you what my thought is on each of them, the guys that I would like them to be interested in or to interview, the people that I would most like to see take over. And I'm going to give you some opinions on who I don't think will be in contention for the Seahawks. You cannot start this conversation, though, without talking about Dan Quinn, purely for the fact that with other teams, when they have decided to fire their coaches at the end of the season, none of the main reporters, Schefter, Garofalo, Rappaport, people like that, have come out and said the Washington Commanders are very clearly going to be interested in this guy. The LA Chargers are going to focus on this player. They might do a search, but this coach, rather than player, this coach is going to be very much at the forefront of their thinking. And what happened today, as soon as the Pete Carroll news broke, was you had several reporters connecting Dan Quinn with the Seahawks. I do not think this is a coincidence. There has been a bit of buzz and talk about Dan Quinn coming back to the Seahawks ever since he went to Dallas. And the feeling has been that whenever Pete Carroll goes, that Quinn could be a candidate to replace him. The Seahawks will have had some thought about what is going to happen next. They have not fired Carroll today and are now launching a search. They may well be preparing to interview people who they don't know and are willing to be moved enough to go and appoint them to replace Carroll. But they will have had in their mind an idea of what the next era looks like. And the fact that these people are talking about Quinn, the fact that Quinn has got connections to Seattle, the fact that Quinn has worked with John Schneider before, the fact that he's been a head coach before, that they will feel like then they know what they're getting, I think means that there is something in this, and that it would seem to me, I would suggest right now, pretty likely that Dan Quinn will be the next Seahawks head coach. I'm not completely bought into that. I think there are pros and cons, which I'll talk a little bit about. But it does feel as if that's the way that this is going. Now, Jeff Howe is a very good reporter for The Athletic, put a tweet out earlier saying, as for the Seahawks' next head coach, Cowboys defensive coordinator Dan Quinn is still very highly regarded in Seattle and has been a hot name the past couple of hiring cycles. But the Seahawks are expected to cast a wide net in the search for Carroll's replacement. That's a really encouraging tweet because that was somebody going, yeah, okay, he's going to be in the running here, but he's not necessarily going to be a shoe-in for this job. So I found that very encouraging. I wanted to raise that. But it would make some sense for the Seahawks to go, okay, we know who we want to speak to, and worst case scenario, let's say, they're going to go with a guy that they really like, which is Dan Quinn. I think that's easily how this could play out, but we'll see. What would Dan Quinn bring to the table? He's been to a Super Bowl as a head coach. Whenever you've been a head coach before, there are no surprises. You're coming in, you know what it's like to stand up in front of a whole bunch of guys and lead the room. You have made decisions that you will have learned from. You will have had experiences where things have gone well and where things have gone badly, and it shapes you as a person, and it helps make you make decisions again in the future. So those are the positives. I think there's a really good chance that he'd put together a good staff because he's very well respected. As I've been sort of chatting to people, there's a feeling that maybe Al Harris would come with him to be his defensive coordinator, and Al Harris, for me, is a dude and would be a really good sort of defensive coordinator, partner in crime for Dan Quinn as they try and fix this defense. So there's a lot of things there that would be interesting. You know, I've been asking people who know Dan Quinn, you know, what is he like? And, you know, a lot of the talk is that he is a great communicator, that he is somebody who he will be able to connect with his players at an excellent level. That is perhaps something I'm not suggesting that Carroll hasn't been able to connect to his players, but the way that some of them have been behaving, it there's just been something a little bit wrong in the last few months with the Seahawks. And if Dan Quinn can come in and reconnect with those players and get them buying in and get them acting the way that they should be, on and off the field, then that could be a big thing. So great communicator, somebody who people will play for. That is kind of like the feeling with Dan Quinn. So those are the positives. The negatives are when he was at Atlanta, Atlanta's defense was very average statistically. There was nothing special about his defense. So while he's had success with the Legion of Boom and he's had success with Micah Parsons and co., when he did not have elite players at his disposal, he did not create a fantastic defense. Kyle Shanahan and Matt Ryan, or Kyle Shanahan producing an MVP season from Matt Ryan, is what took the Atlanta Falcons to a Super Bowl they should have won. As soon as Kyle Shanahan left to go and take the job in San Francisco, Quinn's record in Atlanta was 24-29. So Kyle Shanahan presumably is not going to be coming with Dan Quinn to run the offense in Seattle. I think that's pretty safe to say. So if that isn't the case, do you run the risk of just appointing somebody who is going to collect 9 and 8 seasons at best, like Pete Carroll has just done for the last 2 years? That would be my my concern there. And while the defense does need fixing, you kind of feel like, is Dan Quinn, one, the man for that job, and two, the man who is going to knock Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay off their perch? And that's the thing that I keep coming back to as to what is going to be important. The next head coach of the Seahawks has to be someone that you legitimately believe can be the best coach in the division. That's a tall order because Shanahan and McVay are very, very good. But whoever comes in has to be at that level. So who is that guy? I'm not convinced it's Dan Quinn. Who could it be? So the names that I was immediately drawn to, Ben Johnson in Detroit. I've listened to Ben Johnson's press conferences tonight. I'd listened to them before, but I wanted to get a refresher on what he's like as a communicator, as a person. Very impressive, very intelligent, well-spoken, speaks with an authority, great clarity on what he wants to say and what he wants to do. It was very interesting listening to him talk about how they use elements of LA's offense to help support Jared Goff, but then they do other things. I'm very, very impressed with Ben Johnson. And when I think about what the next Seahawks era should look like, for me, it should be about getting the best out of DK Metcalf and Jackson Smith and Jigba and Tyler Lockett, getting the best out of Ken Walker and Zach Charbonnet, and putting together a structured offense that can be really exciting. The Detroit Lions are not 12-5 because of their defense. They're 12-5 because of the offense. They have a quarterback in Detroit, Jared Goff, who's very similar, I would suggest, maybe not stylistically, but in talent maybe, to Geno Smith. He's had success with Goff. You could imagine he would have success with Geno Smith. He has managed to get a lot of production out of the 2 running backs this year and the 2 running backs they had last year. Remember, they had Williams was in Detroit. He's gone to New Orleans. The only touchdown that Williams had in New Orleans this year was the controversial one at the weekend, which led to all that hoo-ha between Arthur Smith and Dennis Allen. That was the only one he had. When he was in Detroit, it was touchdowns every week. So they've got a lot of production out of 2 running back system. And this year has been exactly the same. They have an extremely productive running game. They get a lot out of Amon-Ra St. Brown and the receivers. And Sam Laporta, as a rookie, was a revelation at tight end. One of the things the Seahawks have not done well for a long, long time is get a lot out of their tight ends. So I think he fits perfectly what the identity should be for the Seahawks moving forward. As I mentioned, I think this is the other thing you've got to consider here. Whoever gets this job can't just be a good coordinator. They kind of have to be a CEO. They have to be someone who is going to lead the organization. They have to be somebody who is a fantastic communicator, and that is, as we mentioned, a thing that's going to help Dan Quinn. I think Ben Johnson is that type of guy. And while it's impossible to sit here and go, well, he's going to be better than Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay, because that, again, is a really high bar, I think he's cut from the same cloth. So I would suggest that Ben Johnson, right now, and I reserve the right to change my opinion, would be my favoured candidate to take over in Seattle. But he's going to be highly in demand. And then you have to ask, as much as I can say he would be my favourite now, when you get him into an interview process and you go, who's your defensive coordinator going to be? Who's your special teams coach going to be? Who's your support staff going to be? What's the identity going to be of your team? Tell us about your philosophy. That's make or break. And we're never going to know those answers until so-and-so gets the job and we find out who the defensive coordinator is going to be and stuff like that. So his ability to put a staff together is a vital part of this, as it will be for all candidates. And I have absolutely no idea whether he'd do a great job or not of putting a staff together. But I think he is very talented and a very interesting candidate. Mike Macdonald at Baltimore, you just can't sniff the results, really. I mean, they're just fantastic. He replaced Wink Martindale, who, under his leadership, the Ravens were the 28th best defense in the league per DVOA. Macdonald comes in. They were 8th last year and 1st this year. He does not have Nick Bosa, Myles Garrett, Aaron Donald, Micah Parsons to lean on the defense. He's got everything out of Jadeveon Clowney, and he's developed players like Justin Madubuike. He gets a lot out of the linebackers, turn the safeties into very productive players. The cornerback situation has been a little bit iffy at times, but he's still got a lot of production out of those guys. And they've got the number one defense in the NFL. And unlike Quinn, and this is the other concern I have with Dan Quinn, I should have mentioned this, they get the doors blown off by the Niners. And similar when they went to Buffalo to play the Bills, look what the Ravens did in Santa Clara. Went and gave Kyle Shanahan a bit of a nightmare in that game and won the game. So he feels like a real rising star. I think a good communicator. I think someone who's perhaps a little bit more, when he speaks, he's not a charismatic guy necessarily like Ben Johnson, but very to the point, very interesting, engaging. Doesn't say, says a lot without actually using a lot of words, I would suggest. And then there's some footage online of him, coaching. He's quite fun, quite jokey on the field. I think he would be a very interesting candidate. Again, he's young. He's only been the Ravens defensive coordinator for 2 years. He was with Harbaugh before that in Michigan. Before that, he was with Baltimore. He's got kind of a limited experience. Can he put together a great staff? I don't know. Offensive coordinator would have to be fantastic because he's a defensive-minded head coach. But if your main priority is to fix the defense, which it may or may not be, he has shown that he can take a struggling defense and turn it into the best defense in the NFL. And he's shown he can beat the Niners. So that's something I think is worth pointing out. Bob Slowick in Houston, I still think is a bit of an unknown quantity because he's only been the offensive coordinator for a season, not even a full season. He's obviously got a lot out of CJ Stroud. He's got a lot out of the receivers who all have taken a step forward, and Tank Dell, a rookie, did ever so well as well. So you've seen everybody kind of elevate. It's a good offense. It's the main reason why the Texans are in the playoffs and won their division, despite previously being hopeless. He used to work with Shanahan and McVay and all of those guys in Washington. So he's from that kind of same tree. And the Shanahan McVay coaches who have gone on to be head coaches have all provided a base level of offense which has been competitive. So it's not just some of the bigger names. Zach Taylor's taken Cincinnati to a Super Bowl. Matt LaFleur's got Green Bay into position to have winning seasons. Kevin O'Connell had a very good first season with Minnesota, and the one this year was completely kiboshed by Kirk Cousins' injury. Even then, they were competitive with a bit of a shambles at quarterback, trying to fit guys in here, there, and everywhere. I'm missing somebody, I know I am. But the point being is that Mike McDaniels, obviously in Miami, even when these teams have not been great, the offense has kind of produced at a certain level. So Bob Slowick could well come in and provide that. Again, has he got the experience to put a great staff together? Is he a CEO type? I don't know. I can't answer that. Is he special? Is he a rising star? I don't know, but I'm intrigued by him because of his history and because he's come from Shanahan and he's worked with McVay and those guys. Those types of coaches have had a lot of success. So they were the sort of the names that I was immediately drawn to. Now I want to go and say the guys that I don't think are going to be in the running for this. So the first one, Mike Vrabel. Mike Vrabel's kind of a fun guy. He looks quite grumpy, and he is grumpy in press conferences and on the sideline, especially in the last few weeks. He always kind of had this look on his face, like he was looking at, like he wanted to go on and strangle somebody on the football field. One of his players, and it. I don't know whether that is what the Seahawks are looking for. Some of the stuff about him falling out with the GMs has been dismissed a little bit, and it was more a case of he was happy to continue, but the Titans kind of wanted to move on. They want to go in a different direction. I say he seems quite fun in interviews. Like when he was on Bussing with the Boys, he was talking about some things I'm not going to mention here, but yeah, they were asking him questions that you don't usually hear football head coaches talking about. And I thought it was quite interesting he was willing to go there. And John Schneider's kind of a bit of a fun guy, and I can imagine their sense of humour as being somewhat similar. I'm just not sure if the Seahawks want to go down that road, of a coach who himself has just left a job after not having a winning season. They haven't had back-to-back now, not had great seasons. Is he really a guy who could find himself in the Pacific Northwest as opposed to maybe going back to New England and or staying on that side of the country? I don't know. I just don't see. I mean, I'm not against Vrabel. If Vrabel came in, I'd be really intrigued because he's so different to Carroll, and I would be excited to see what he can do. And at times, I have been jealous watching the Titans run the ball down teams' throats with Derrick Henry and play with physicality and toughness. And I would like to see that come back to Seattle. I just don't think it's a likely fit. I don't think him coming to the Pacific Northwest, I don't think him as a person replacing Carroll is necessarily the way this team's going to go. The one name that a lot of people are getting very excited about, and a lot of Seahawks fans, surprising number of Seahawks fans and media members have been asking for Jim Harbaugh. Now, on a personal level, I have nothing against Jim Harbaugh becoming the Seahawks' next head coach. I know Adam, who does our streams, I've seen some of his comments. He's been saying things like he will never go to Lumen Field again if Jim Harbaugh is appointed. I don't feel that passionately about it because while he was public enemy number one when he was the Niners coach, you cannot dispute that the guy wins. He has won in San Diego, in college. He won in Stanford and made them relevant. He went to the Niners, who were useless for years, and immediately turned them into a tough, physical contender. They were fantastic. Nearly won a Super Bowl, nearly got to another, as we know. Then he goes to Michigan and turns an increasingly irrelevant Michigan team into the national champions. And they play tough, physical football. I can never be opposed to winning coaches who play tough physical football. I think it would be the kind of culture shock that he would bring would be intriguing, and I would be fully prepared to give it a go. I don't think he's going to be the Seahawks' next head coach. John Schneider has his chance to go and appoint his guy and lead the Seahawks franchise. The minute that he appoints Jim Harbaugh is going to want to choose the next quarterback, not John Schneider. He's going to want to have a say in the draft. He's going to want to be more than just the coach. He's going to want to have some executive power. And I think there will be teams who are desperately clamoring to get to him to make a high-profile appointment, and they will give him the kind of powers that he's looking for. I also don't think, as a franchise, the Seahawks, as much as they have essentially fired Carroll, not officially, but it is a firing, I don't see them replacing Carroll with his old arch enemy. So, yeah, I just don't think it's very, very likely. And again, the only reason why I think Harbaugh would entertain it, well, there's two reasons. One, the financial package would have to be superb. And two, the fact that he could go and potentially hammer the Niners twice a season. Now, when I was saying earlier, you need to get somebody who could potentially be the best coach in that division. For me, Harbaugh's got that potential. Harbaugh could come in and he could be someone who is at least on a par with those two guys. He has proven that he's a winner. And like I say, it is intriguing. I just do not think it's going to happen. I don't see him wanting to move so far away from his parents and his brother and his family. The people have said a number of times that where the destination is so important for him and his family, that I don't think going to the furthest point away from everybody that he knows is very likely. And I don't see John Schneider going, here's my one chance to run the football operations, and I'm going to go and get a coach who, if not immediately, is going to eventually sort of spoil for an argument and want to make every decision. And that is the thing with Harbaugh. You can only have him in small doses. And there's a bit of shenanigans that come with Harbaugh as well. And he is a bit difficult to deal with. And I don't think John Schneider, having finally got this opportunity, is going to want to bring Jim Harbaugh into the building and deal with him every single day. So I don't see that one happening. Kalen DeBoer. So it's never seemed that likely because it's never been talked about in terms of the NFL and stuff like this with Kalen DeBoer. But I'd be really intrigued to see what that would look like. He's just been so... I talked about Harbaugh just won everywhere. Well, Kalen DeBoer's won everywhere. And he's done it with teams that are not exactly... he's not taken the Alabama job and won there. It's Fresno State, it's Washington, it's places like that. He's had success in Indiana. He just feels like a special coach. So I would be intrigued by it. But there's so much going on in college. If Harbaugh leaves Michigan, is Michigan going to go for him? Alabama's just seen Nick Saban retire, and I'm seeing on social media people going, they really like Kalen DeBoer. Would he go to Alabama to replace Saban? Listen, they're two really difficult jobs because if you're either replacing the guy who's just won the national championship and is going to lose a lot of... Apparently, they're going to send a record number of players into the draft. So good luck replacing all of those in year one. And then at Alabama, you're the guy, as good as it would be to be the Alabama head coach, following Saban's a really difficult job. And I think that might be a difficult sell for a lot of coaches. And I think the reason that Saban's retiring is because he sees the landscape changing. He can no longer just go into a living room and go, come and play for us, we're Alabama, we win. Because the guy on the couch across from him with his parents is now saying, that's fine, coach, but this other team's offering me $1 million to go and play for them. And I think that's part of the reason why he retired. I think he's had enough. I think college football has changed so much that Nick Saban doesn't want to be part of it anymore. But DeBoer's living in that world, and maybe he feels there'll be advantages to being in Alabama, and maybe he will be a candidate for that job as well. So there's that possibility to discuss, first of all. My personal prediction with DeBoer is that he will sign a new contract with Washington, and that will happen really quickly now because of the jobs that are coming up like Alabama. And if people start connecting him to the Seahawks, I think what you'll find is suddenly he'll get a nice big fat contract extension in the next few days, and I think he will stay at Washington because the Huskies can really ill afford to lose him. But I would be fascinated to see what he could do in the NFL coaching for the Seahawks. I just don't think it's very likely, and I think he's going to stay at Washington. So they're the three that I don't think will happen. There are some others that I want to bring up just to sort of throw the names out there. Brian Callahan at the Bengals has helped Zach Taylor do a good job. Not only they drafted Joe Burrow and he had instant success and they've got to a Super Bowl with the Bengals, which is no mean feat. When you listen to Brian Callahan speak about what the modern NFL is like, he's talking about very modern concepts. He was talking about the passing game being so important. They've done a very good job in really featuring T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. That's what the Seahawks need moving forward. He's had experience of going to Super Bowls, not just with the Bengals and Zach Taylor, but with Peyton Manning and the Broncos, who he's worked very closely with. He's from a long-time NFL family. He's only 39, but he's Bill Callahan's son. So I'd be interested to hear that they interviewed him as well. And also, Bill Callahan, his dad, might be the best defensive line coach in the NFL. He's currently with the Browns. An amazing job there. Would love to see him in Seattle. And if Brian getting the Seahawks head coaching job means that he could come and join his son in Seattle, then I would be very interested in that. Brian Flores, the Vikings defensive coordinator, I'm not really big on just going out and getting a defensive. I think a offensive-minded coach is the way to go. But Flores has done a very good job. I don't have an issue with a complete culture change compared to what Pete Carroll was like, because I think that could be quite useful. And Flores is a very different character to Carroll. In the early years at Miami, he was seen as like a real rising star, and then he was ousted. He's rebuilt things in a stint with the Steelers and now with the Vikings. He has got a lawsuit up against the league, and that could cause some issues for him as he goes for head coaching jobs. But there might be a way to resolve that before he takes a position, and he is in the league still, so it's not as if the NFL has stopped him. So that could be a bit of an issue there, but I think he could be interesting. And then, look, the Browns have had a very good season on offense. Look at what they've done with Joe Flacco. Look at what they've done with PJ Walker. They've been able to cope with the nonsense of Deshaun Watson, first and foremost, but then second of all, having to cycle through 3 different quarterbacks this year. And now all of a sudden, people are not looking at Joe Flacco as a liability for the Browns going into the playoffs. So I think Kevin Stefanski is probably going to win Coach of the Year. I would be very interested in seeing if there are people within that organization who equally have done a very good job. And the offensive coordinator is Alex Van Pelt, who's got ties with Green Bay. And he's been in the NFL an awful long time, very experienced. He's in his 50s. I wondered if he might be somebody that they have a conversation with. As a complete left field, I would not mind them contacting the Browns about potentially trading for Kevin Stefanski. The reason why I suggest that is they are a shambles. Ownership's a shambles. They are committed to Deshaun Watson's fully guaranteed contract for years. His cap hit is astronomical next year, and they are going to pay the price of that. They are not going to be able to, they're going to have cap problems for years now because of Deshaun Watson. The only way that they could sustain it is if Watson was playing at an elite level, and he hasn't been, and who knows what his future is. He can't even stay healthy these days. And when he does stay healthy, he is average. So that is the future for Kevin Stefanski in Cleveland. I would not be opposed to just seeing if you could get him out of there, because he is a fantastic coach. Look what he's done. The Browns never qualified for the playoffs. Was it like 3 playoff qualifications since they re-emerged in Cleveland? And he's responsible for 2 of them. And their first playoff win in forever. And they're back there now. And look at the way they play. They punch in the mouth. They've beaten the Niners. They've beaten the Ravens in Baltimore. If you could go and get him, listen, I know it would be costly in terms of a trade, but I think he's that good. And I think the Seahawks roster is capable of being a lot better than it is. I would not be against going and seeing if you could do a trade there. But whenever you're sort of pitching stuff like that, it is somewhat fanciful. So that's everything that I think. As I said, I hope offense more than anything, because I think the Seahawks roster right now is currently weighted towards offense, with a top 10 pick on a left tackle. DK's been paid. Tyler's been paid. You've drafted Jackson Smith-Njigba with the top 20 pick. You've drafted 2 running backs in the second round. Rather than have a defensive coach and say, well, okay, just bring in a guy who can kind of work with all of that. I think you make the offense your identity. You get a coach who can max out all of those weapons and put points on the board. And then you go and get a complementary defensive coach and say, look, with the 24th defense per DVOA, we can't stop the run. Just go and stop the freaking run, for God's sake, and make us like the 18th best defense or the 16th best defense. As long as the offense is rolling, that's okay. And there are experienced defensive coaches out there that you could go and appoint, or you could go and get a young upcoming type of young defensive coach and go that way. But that's what I would like to see. And if you are going to go for a defensive-minded coach, then it does have to be someone who can be not only a big-time leader, but has shown that he can completely turn around a defense. And that to me is more Mike Macdonald than Dan Quinn. But if I had to put money on who it would be, I would probably guess Dan Quinn. If I had to say who my favorite would be as of today, it would be Ben Johnson. Would I be against Jim Harbaugh? No. Do I think it's going to happen? No. So those are my thoughts. And I wanted to do this video before the close of play because, like I say, this is where everyone's going to be now. People are going to rightly pay respects to Pete Carroll. It was an unbelievable press conference that he did earlier. Very emotional. It was emotional to watch. And rightly, he's going to be celebrated. Get that statue built. Do whatever you can. Put him in the Ring of Honor tomorrow, as far as I'm concerned. Hang a banner. I don't care. Whatever you want to do it. And make sure that Pete Carroll, next time the Seahawks have got a huge playoff game in Seattle, is raising that darn flag. So Yeah, but things are going to change and people want to know who's going to come in and discuss that. So who do you want? Let me know in the comment section who you want to come in and be the Seahawks head coach. Let me know what you think about my thoughts as well. We're very interested in that. Just keep it civil. SeahawksDraftBlog.com. I've done a huge article on there, just sort of running through everything. There is a video. I was on Vison tonight, so go and check out their YouTube channel, VSIN. You can see my hit on there. I am going to be on KJR at 11 a.m. Pacific time tomorrow with Puck and Jim. That is Thursday, so make sure you check that out. And like I say, SeahawksDraftBlog.com for all of the analysis. There'll be loads of articles, loads of coverage of this on there. So go and check that out. Make sure you subscribe to this channel as well so you don't miss anything. Hit the bell button so that you get the notifications so you don't miss any of the videos. Give this video a like. Leave a comment in the comment section as well. Helps the algorithm. And until next time, bye for now.